Next up, the Islamic State, ISIS. They have been tearing down churches and museums all through Iraq and Syria and now Libya. And now it seems as they're looting these, not only are they stealing the treasure and breaking to pieces all the statues and porcelain and anything that can be broken. The things that can't be broken are being stolen and sold on eBay. Dozens of coins have been found on eBay, coins and other artifacts, as they're moved easily in pockets and backpacks, moved across borders into Lebanon, Turkey, Jordan, where the internet is easier to access. The authorities are watching for them, but it's awful hard to identify if a given coin, even if it is 1,000 years old, if it's part of that or not. So, next up, so much to talk about this week. Next up, from Raymond Ibrahim. And I want to take a second and tip my hat to Raymond Ibrahim, to Robert Spencer, to Brigitte Gabriel, to Pamela Geller, to David Horowitz. These are all the leaders in the anti-Islam fight. These are the people that own websites like Front Page Magazine, Atlas Shrugs, Jihad Watch. They're authors. They've all written several books on the topic. I get much of my content from them, from their books, from their websites, from their lectures. Raymond Ibrahim is pointing out John Brennan, our CIA chief, his deceptions about Islam. Well, it's hardly a surprise. It's not mentioned in this article, but it is widely believed that John Brennan actually converted to Islam when he was serving in Saudi Arabia. But on March 13th, Brennan insisted that the Islamic State members are not Islamic. Instead, they are terrorists. They are criminals. He says many of them are psychopathic thugs, murderers who use a religious concept and masquerade and mask themselves in that religious construct. Now note the terms that are familiar to Western people: terrorists, criminals, and such. The Islamic State jihadis may be all of those things, he says, including psychopathic thugs from a Western paradigm. But the fact left out by Brennan is that according to Islamic law and history, savage and psychopathic behavior is permissible, especially in the context of jihad. But perhaps Brennan knows all of this and is simply being strategic. After all, the CIA head has also warned against ascribing Islamic legitimacy to the overseas terrorist group, saying that allowing them to identify themselves with Islam does a disservice to Muslims around the world. I think I dispelled that when I read off the list of countries and states where jihad is being perpetrated. But of course, Brennan is just following President Obama's lead. A month earlier, Obama said, "We must never accept the premise that ISIS put forward, because it is a lie, nor should we grant these terrorists and the religious legitimacy they seek. They are not religious leaders, and they are terrorists. And we are not at war with Islam. We are at war with a people who have perverted Islam." The problem is that, according to Western norms, which are built atop of Judeo-Christian principles, Islam has been perverted from day one. As far back as the 8th century, mere generations after Islam was born, Byzantine chronicler Theophanes wrote in his Chronographia, "He, Muhammad, taught those who gave ear to him that the one slaying the enemy or being slain by the enemy entered into paradise. And he said the paradise was carnal and sensual, orgies of eating and drinking and women. And also there was a river of wine, and the women were of another sort, the duration of sex greatly prolonged, and its pleasure long enduring, and all sorts of other bullshit. And I'll take this moment to remind you, I say this each and every week, we must remember that all Muslims are not terrorists. But it's equally important to remember that every Muslim is a follower of a goat-raping pedophile named Mohammed. These are not my words, these are facts. Mohammed did rape goats. This is a fact. He did rape children. This is a fact. It's in the texts. It's in the religious texts and historical texts that are quoted by Islamists worldwide. I am not insulting or attacking Islam. I merely explain it. More to the point, Ibrahim says, every atrocity ISIS has committed, the beheadings, the crucifying, the raping, enslaving, or burning people alive, is a legitimate act according to Islamic law and the teaching of deeds of Muhammad, that most perfect and moral man. Based on Islamic historical texts, Muhammad sent assassins to slaughter his critics. And one older woman, including poets, and one older woman whose body was dismembered by her Muslim assailants. He had an infidel tortured to death with fire in order to reveal his tribe's hidden treasure. He so-called married the man's wife hours later. The woman, Safia, later confessed that of all men I hated the Prophet the most, for he killed my husband, he killed my brother, and he killed my father. And reportedly, he used to visit and have sex with his 9 wives in a single hour. Again, this information is all based on Islamic texts deemed reliable and regularly quoted by Muslim scholars and theologians, not fabrications of Islamophobes. And having used the word Islamophobe, my friends, I beg of you, go to patriotradioshow.com and listen to my show on Islamophobes. Let me open your eyes what an Islamophobe is and why the term is used. Because words do matter. The world's Muslims aren't holding their breath to hear what sort of Islamic legitimacy the U.S. government is going to deem upon them. They don't care. Americans, on the other hand, who still wonder why they hate us, Americans are in desperate need of understanding. And using accurate terminology is the first step our government should use. Meanwhile, Brennan whitewashes phrases and praises jihad. Speaking back in 2010, the politically correct chief said, "Nor do we describe our enemies as jihadists or Islamists, because jihad is a holy struggle, a legitimate tenet of Islam, meaning to purify oneself or one's community, and there is nothing holy or legitimate or Islamic about murdering innocent men, women, and children." Inasmuch as Brennan was right that jihad is a holy struggle, a legitimate tenet of Islam, meaning to purify oneself, he greatly errs, again, projecting Judeo-Christian notions of what constitutes holy and legitimate and innocent onto Islam. Jihad is nothing less than offensive warfare to spread Islamic rule, a cause seen both legitimate and holy in Islam. Moreover, jihadis regularly seek to purify their communities by purging them of infidels. All of this leads to the following question. If the Islamic State and other jihadi organizations are not animated by Islam, then what, according to the CIA chief, is truly fueling their jihad? Brennan seems to think, as was quoted by the State Department spokesman last week in the White House press briefing, they're not fighting and killing and murdering and beheading men, women, and babies because they hate us. They're not doing it for Islam. They're doing it because they lack sufficient job opportunities. He wants to sit down and counsel them, find jobs that would take this murderous bloodthirst out of their mind. They've only been doing this, murdering innocent people around the world for 1,400 years. So why can't Obama just reach out and lay hands on these scumbags and fix them? You don't use psychoanalysis on a rattlesnake. You cut off its frickin' head. We know who these people are, we know what they want, and we know what they will do. And these aren't my words, they're their words. They tell us every time they find a microphone, we will kill the infidel. They show us every time they find a camera. They cut off our heads. They cut off babies' heads. They post baby heads on spikes. These savages are scum, and they need to be purged from the earth, but certainly from the United States of America. And we need to get politicians in office that will recognize this and stop taking money to back them up and support them and turn their backs on them as they build mosques and terrorist training camps around the country, as they build Sharia councils such as the one discovered up in Dallas this last month. ISIS last week killed 3 more women in Mosul, accusing them of refusing temporary marriage with other jihadists. ISIS has been going through city after city. This story is out of Mosul. They round up the women and they force them to temporary marry. In other words, become whores of the jihad. Prostitution is illegal, so they grant a temporary marriage. And these women are told to screw the soldiers that are fighting in Allah's name. If they don't become whores for Allah, they get executed. Last week they rounded up 13, and 3 of them would rather go home to God than to do the bidding of these savages. In the UK, we've covered these stories time and time again. Grooming gangs. What the media, when they finally started covering it, would call Asian grooming gangs. Doesn't sound that bad. A bunch of Filipinos standing on the street corner combing their hair, right? What's to get upset about? First off, the Asians are Pakistanis, Afghanis, Indians. What do they have in common? They are all Muslims, each and every one of them. And they're not combing their hair. They are turning out children, young girls, and selling their bodies. 1,400 British non-Muslim children were gang raped and brutalized by Muslims, and this is in one city alone. And several staff members described their nervousness about identifying ethnic origins of perpetrators for fear of being thought racist. You want to call me a racist? Fine, call me a racist. They were Muslims, M-U-S-L-I-M-S. Or now we're calling them Muslims, because that means evil, M-O-S-L-E-M-S. And now we see the police bosses are telling officers not to pursue investigations of these rape gangs. The Muslim rape gangs went unreported